In the mid-1950s, Philadelphia's Market Street pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to change with every record spun inside the WFIL studio. Teenagers crowded the floor, their laughter mingling with the beat of rock and roll, while television cameras carried their joy into countless living rooms. Among them was a boy named Lenny Natale. He didn't arrive with the flashiest moves or a desire to steal the spotlight. Instead, he carried himself with quiet steadiness, a presence that made him both ordinary and unforgettable at the same time. Lenny was part of the earliest generation of American Bandstand, one of the young faces who stood at the very beginning of what would become a national sensation. He may not have been the most daring dancer, but he represented something that viewers recognized instantly: the everyday teenager, just like the boy next door. For those who tuned in after school, Lenny offered a reminder that the dance floor was open to everyone, not only the boldest or the most polished. Those Market Street days were about more than just music. They were about belonging, about finding your place in a room full of strangers and discovering that rhythm could make you part of something bigger. Lenny's story began there, under the bright lights of a small studio, where he became a thread in the fabric of a cultural moment that would shape American youth forever. When Lenny Natale first stepped into the WFIL studio on Market Street, he was just another teenager swept up in the growing tide of rock and roll. The room was alive with noise, the turntables spinning, the chatter of kids waiting for their chance to dance, the hum of cameras that made everything feel larger than life. For a boy from Camden, it was both intimidating and exhilarating. Unlike some of the confident regulars who came prepared to show off, Lenny entered without polish or pretense. Friends would later recall that he only knew how to slow dance at the start, and in many ways that shyness defined his early days. Yet what he lacked in flair, he made up for in sincerity. He wasn't trying to impress the camera, he was trying to belong, to move with the music just like everyone else. His entry was made possible by Joe Fusco, already a familiar face in the bandstand circle. Joe's introduction gave Lenny a foothold in a group where popularity often determined who got the best spots on the floor. With that gesture, Lenny wasn't just a boy watching from the edges anymore. He was part of the show. The mid-1950s were a turning point in American culture. Rock and roll was stirring excitement and controversy, and Bandstand became the daily stage where that energy played out. For kids watching at home, Lenny was proof that you didn't need to be flashy to be part of the magic. Even with tentative steps, he showed that the dance floor welcomed anyone who loved the music. Those first moments, awkward yet genuine, marked the beginning of Lenny's journey on Bandstand. They set the tone for the role he would come to play, not as a star performer, but as a quiet reminder that every teenager had a place in this new world of rhythm and television. As weeks passed, something began to change for Lenny Natale. The boy who had once clung to the comfort of slow steps started letting the music carry him further. Rock and roll had a way of drawing people out, and for Lenny, each new record spun by Dick Clark seemed like an invitation to push past his hesitation. Bandstand wasn't just about talent, it was about being present in the moment. Viewers watching from their living rooms could spot the difference between someone performing for the camera and someone simply enjoying the beat. Lenny belonged to the second group. His movements weren't dramatic, but they were genuine. In a world where teenage culture was suddenly under a spotlight, that kind of authenticity stood out. Other regulars came to appreciate him as a steady partner. He wasn't competing for attention or crowding the frame. He was the kind of boy who made sure his partner felt comfortable and seen. That quiet reliability gave him a place in the rhythm of the studio, even if his name wasn't shouted in fan magazines. Fans noticed him too, not as the flashiest dancer, but as one of the kids who made Bandstand feel real. By the time the show's reach expanded beyond Philadelphia, Lenny had found his groove. He represented a side of teenage America that wasn't about chasing the spotlight, but about simply being part of the music. In his way, he embodied the truth that the success of American Bandstand rested not only on the stars, but on the countless ordinary kids who made the dance floor come alive every afternoon. On American Bandstand, the dance floor was more than just a stage for music. It was a web of friendships, rivalries, and occasional romances that unfolded before millions of eyes. For Lenny Natale, those connections were at the heart of his experience. He might never have chased the spotlight, but the bonds he formed gave meaning to his time on the show. His first real connection came through Joe Fusco, who had already carved out a place among the regulars. Joe's introduction smoothed Lenny's path into the group, giving him a sense of belonging in a setting where it was easy to be overlooked. That bond remained important, a reminder that Bandstand was as much about relationships as it was about music. There are also community stories that link Lenny to Betty Romantini, one of the most admired dancers of the Philadelphia era. According to recollections passed down by fans, the two were more than just dance partners. They eventually married, making them one of the rare regular couples to take their connection beyond the studio. Though the marriage is said to have ended years later, the very idea fascinates those who still follow Bandstand's legacy. It illustrates how the lines between on-screen chemistry and real life could blur, especially in an environment where teenagers were living their coming-of-age moments under a national spotlight. What made Lenny unique was not only his own presence, but how he supported those around him. He wasn't vying for the camera or crafting a showy routine. Instead, he was the kind of partner who let others shine, who made his partners feel secure as they moved to the music. That steadiness brought balance to a stage often dominated by bold personalities. Looking back, these friendships and partnerships capture what Bandstand was truly about. It wasn't only about who danced best or who made the headlines. It was about teenagers growing up together, testing out friendships, love, and identity while the world watched. For Lenny, those connections became the part of his story that lasted far beyond the studio lights. By the early 1960s, American Bandstand had outgrown its Philadelphia studio, and many of the familiar faces who had defined its first years moved on with their lives. For Lenny Natale, the shift came naturally. He had enjoyed the music, the friendships, and the moment of being part of something larger than himself, but he wasn't chasing stardom. Instead, he chose a different path, one grounded in work, community, and family. Lenny became the proud owner of Leonardo's limousine service in Marlton, New Jersey. Running a limousine business demanded reliability and discretion, qualities that matched his character well. To his clients, he wasn't the former dancer from television, but the man who made sure their journeys were comfortable and on time. It was steady work, and it reflected the way Lenny had always approached life, not by seeking applause, but by doing things with quiet consistency. Later, he expanded his horizons into the restaurant world, opening a business in Voorhees. There, he poured the same energy into hospitality, building a place where people could gather, share meals, and create their own memories. For many in his community, this was the Lenny they knew best, not the teenager on TV, but the businessman who contributed to local life. His post-Bandstand years remind us that fame doesn't have to define a person. While some regulars tried to extend their time in the public eye, Lenny turned toward a life that valued hard work and stability. In doing so, he carried the essence of Bandstand with him, not as a performance to be replayed, but as a memory that quietly shaped who he became. Long after the days of bright studio lights, Lenny Natale found his greatest joy not on a dance floor, but around the dinner table. To those who loved him, he wasn't remembered as the teenager from television, but as a devoted father, grandfather, and friend. His life after Bandstand revealed a man whose true stage was his home and community. His children, Deborah, Adriana, and Darren, saw firsthand the values that guided his life. He worked hard, not for recognition, but to ensure their stability and happiness. For them, the stories of his Bandstand years were part of family lore, shared in small moments, perhaps with a smile or a laugh about the boy who once only knew how to slow dance. But those stories were just one piece of a larger picture. What mattered more was the example he set every day: resilience, humility, and quiet dedication. As time passed, Lenny's role expanded into that of a grandfather. Names like Shane, Justin, Greg, Mark, Jake, Rebecca, Carly, and Logan filled his later years with laughter and pride. To them, he wasn't a former TV dancer or a businessman. He was Pop, the man who listened to their stories, celebrated their achievements, and made each of them feel like the most important person in the room. He was also known as a true fan of Philadelphia's sports teams and someone who delighted in food, qualities that added warmth to his character. These small details, perhaps overlooked by strangers, made him all the more real to those around him. They painted a portrait of a man who lived fully, who took pleasure in the everyday joys of cheering a team, sharing a meal, and watching his family thrive. In the end, the legacy he left his family was deeper than any television appearance. It was the love and loyalty he gave without condition, the lessons carried forward through generations. That was the true rhythm of his life, one that played long after the music of Bandstand had stopped. Although decades separated the height of American Bandstand from Lenny Natale's later life, his name never fully disappeared from the memories of those who cherished the show. Fans kept scrapbooks, swapped photographs, and replayed old clips, and in those collections, Lenny would often appear, not as the star attraction, but as part of the mosaic that gave Bandstand its authenticity. He was remembered as one of the original Market Street teenagers, the kind of face that made the program feel genuine. The magic of Bandstand lay not only in the couples who dominated the screen or made magazine covers, but also in those who reflected the average viewer at home. Lenny embodied that spirit. His presence reminded audiences that you didn't need bold steps or flashy clothes to belong. Sometimes, just showing up with sincerity was enough. Community groups and fan reunions later made sure his name was spoken alongside other regulars, a sign of respect for his role in the show's early years. The fact that his obituary chose to include the phrase, "original member of American Bandstand," says much about how central that chapter remained in his story. It wasn't just a youthful memory, it was part of his identity, woven into how his life was remembered. For today's viewers who look back on the black and white clips of those afternoons in Philadelphia, Lenny represents something timeless. He shows us that the Bandstand legacy wasn't built solely by the stars, but by every teenager who stepped onto that floor and dared to dance. In remembering him, we also remember the countless others who gave the show its enduring heartbeat. On July 7, 2024, at the age of 83, Lenny Natale passed away. His journey had carried him far from the studio on Market Street, yet the memory of those early Bandstand years followed him into every chapter of his life. He was a businessman, a family man, a loyal friend, and a proud Philadelphian. But in the cultural memory of America, he will always remain that young face on the dance floor, helping to shape a program that defined an era. His story reminds us that fame can be fleeting, but the impact of shared experiences lasts a lifetime. The regulars of American Bandstand were not just television personalities, they were ordinary teenagers who grew up before the eyes of a nation. Lenny's life is a testament to the truth that behind every familiar face on the screen was a real person with hopes, work, and love that stretched far beyond the studio lights. As we remember him now, we are invited to reflect. How many other quiet figures from Bandstand, like Lenny, gave us memories that endure even if their names were never in bold headlines? If you've enjoyed revisiting these stories from Bandstand's golden years, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, so you'll never miss another journey back into the lives, the music, and the memories that shaped a generation.